Hey everyone, Daniel Marchena with XDA TV, and today we're going to be doing an unboxing and initial hands-on of the Sony Xperia 1. Stay tuned. So as I just mentioned, we have the Sony Xperia 1, which was just sent over to us by the folks over at Sony. So some of the standout features of this phone, it's the first Sony phone that features 3 rear cameras, a standard shooter, a telephoto, and a wide angle. This is also the world's first phone. It's a 4K OLED panel, which is something no one else has attempted yet, and it comes in that 21:9 aspect ratio that we saw on their prior Xperia 10 line of devices. But again, this is the flagship, fully encased in glass device, so let's go ahead and unbox it and take a look. So as I do with all of my unboxings, I've actually gone ahead and opened up this device and been using it for about a half a day to give you some impressions as well as this unboxing. So I'm going to go ahead and sit that off on the side there and show you what comes in the package when you purchase an Xperia. Now, in the US, if you do pre-order this phone, they are shipping their really high-end headphones, Bluetooth noise-canceling headphones as a pre-order bonus if you order, I believe, in the first week or so of pre-orders going live. So definitely check that out if you're in the US. I believe it's at B&H Photo, Amazon, Best Buy, and the phone ships for $949, which is a steep asking price, but not uncommon for Sony flagships. So inside the box, you get a pair of headphones. These are the same uncomfortable headphones that they've been shipping in the past, with a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on the bottom of them and not USB-C, because the phone does not have a headphone jack. Instead, they give you a USB-C to 3.5 millimeter passive audio adapter. And also in the box, first for this year, this is a USB-C to USB-C cable, because the new power brick is a 18-watt USB PD charger block. So that is really nice that they're including a faster charger in the box instead of using like the Qualcomm Fast Charge. They've now switched over to USB PD. So we're going to go ahead and put the box and stuff off on the side here and really get into the phone. So before we go into a hands-on of the software, I want to go ahead and take a look at the hardware. So like I mentioned, this is 21:9. This is an incredibly tall aspect ratio on a phone. Comparing it to the OnePlus 7 Pro, which is a huge device in its own right, you can see here, I'm going to line these two up, you can see that the Xperia is a good bit taller than the OnePlus 7 Pro. However, the device is a little bit narrower, so that makes it easier to hold in your hand. The device is also incredibly well balanced. It feels very good in your hand, unlike the Xperia 10 Plus that I reviewed over on xdadevelopers.com, which felt incredibly unbalanced and always wanted to topple out of your hand. They've really done a good job making sure this feels balanced. It is fairly light, but again, it is fairly sturdy as well. So this is the black model that they sent me. Again, 6.5-inch display up front here. Down on the bottom, you have a speaker, a USB Type-C port. On the right-hand side, you've got your camera shutter. It's a 2-stage shutter that you're familiar with Sony devices, a dedicated power button, fingerprint unlocking mechanism, which is not a power button, but it will turn on the device from a screen off state. And then you've got your volume rocker here. Sony has been different than a lot of other manufacturers with going with the 2-stage fingerprint sensor. Personally, I prefer this, as it makes the fingerprint sensor really sturdy with the phone, and it makes sure you get a good fingerprint. Whereas with the Galaxy S10e, I had some problems where the button would be pressing in and my finger would move and it wouldn't get a good fingerprint. So I prefer this method, but I know there are a lot of people that don't. It's 6 of one, half dozen of another. Up top here, you have your SIM and micro SD card slot. Keep in mind, it is not a one you have to use a tool to get out, but once you pull it out, the phone will reboot, like Sony's have been doing for years. So around the back here, you have a fully glass back. Now, like OnePlus, they have gone ahead and opted not to include wireless charging, which to me is baffling on this phone. Wireless charging has been a standout feature, a keynote feature of Sony's for years now, and they were the ones who kind of pioneered it in their phones along with Samsung, but we're not seeing it here in their flagship device, which is a very glaring omission, an otherwise fully featured device, because you do have IP water resistance, dual speakers with the earpiece up here and the one on the bottom. It's a really weird omission on this tier of device. In the back, you have your 3-camera array, your white balance sensor, which is something that only Sony is currently doing, and your flash there. Like I mentioned, the 3 cameras, we've got a 12 megapixel, actually all 12 megapixel, which is really nice. Although I do wish the wide angle was a higher resolution because you've got so much in the frame. But again, 12 megapixels across the board, 26 millimeter, 16 millimeter wide angle, and of course your 52 millimeter telescopic lens, which is just a 2x zoom. So pretty familiar, standard with what you're seeing in all the other devices. So when discussing the Sony Xperia 1, 2 things come to mind. It's the camera and it's the display. And the first thing we're going to go ahead and just discuss really briefly is the display. As I mentioned, it's 21:9, a 6.5-inch OLED 4K panel. Now this phone does not run at 4K while you're going through the UI, but will use 4K when playing back videos and so on, which we're going to be showing here in a moment. In the display settings though, you can see that Sony has really partnered with companies to really improve this device over prior Xperias, and that's something that Sony really likes to do. They love partnering with big name companies and companies that bring recognition to the Sony brand. So if we go into image quality settings, you can see here that we have 2 different settings. You've got your standard mode, and then you've got what's called creator mode. And this is using the display to its fullest potential with 10-bit HDR, BT 2020, and fully utilizes that 4K display, but of course not when the system settings are playing. Now, I'm going to try and confirm that, but based on everything that I can see there, it's not 4K when you're just in your standard UI. Again, you have your standard mode there, but you do have auto creator mode that will turn on when it's in certain applications like Netflix. YouTube also kicks it into 4K HDR, so there's a couple of different options there that you can have it turn on if you want to keep it in its standard mode, but my preference is the creator mode. I really like the way that it makes the display look. It looks like it's really naturally tuned. We're hoping to have Dylan take a look at the panel to see exactly how accurate this particular display is. Like Sony, in the past, some old habits die hard. Sony loves notifications, so you do get a notification every time you toggle that. Sony loves putting notifications for everything you do on your device. So now is the time where we're really going to go ahead and show off this amazing panel on the Sony Xperia 1. So we're going to go ahead and go into YouTube to a 4K 60 FPS HDR video. We're going to go ahead and show what this is capable of. Now, I'm only recording in 1080p in standard definition, so you're not going to get the full breadth of what this display is capable of, but it is just amazing to see in person. You can see here on YouTube, it does have 2160 by 60 here as an available option. And when you're here looking at this display and watching this 4K footage, it is by and far the best mobile display I've ever seen on any device. The clarity, the colors, the brightness, the angles, even off angle, the display is incredibly accurate. There is not a whole lot of shifting. Maybe it shifts just a little bit towards the green, but it is a beautiful, beautiful panel. Watching videos, pretty much anything in 4K or HDR in this panel just looks absolutely gorgeous. Again, this is the only 4K OLED panel that you're going to be finding on smartphones, and it's probably going to remain that way probably until next year or mid next year when we start to see some other manufacturers putting 4K panels. The benefits to 4K panels are definitely here or there. It is a huge battery drain, but at the same time too, it does look amazing if you can go ahead and get this content. The other thing you're probably familiar with the Xperia 1 is the cameras. Now, there have been a lot of talk about these cameras, about Sony finally using some of their alpha technology in the cameras and putting that towards making a really, really beautiful camera and just amazing results. And while testing still has to be done on this, I'm pretty impressed, but also disappointed at the same time. But again, I've only had the device for a half a day, so I'm going to go ahead and show some shots here that I took with my Xperia 1 throughout the first day of use in both low light and bright lighting. And you can really see that my best impression of this phone is it looks like a Sony. It looks just like the Sony XZ2 and XZ3 cameras put out. There's really, really good natural representation of colors, of dynamic range, of balance. Dynamic range is definitely something that's been improved over the Xperia XZ2 and XZ3, but you still have that over sharpening that Sony likes to do. They really like to pull out the details, and sometimes that looks really great, like it does here on this Leaf compared to the OnePlus 7 Pro shot. but at times it does make things a little bit too unbelievably sharp. So that's definitely a side effect there. The bokeh mode, which I'm showing off here, does horribly miss these two shots, but again, I'm hoping that Sony really does improve these things, improve the reliability of these kinds of features. But, these are side features of the camera experience. Really, I want to see what it's going to do when I point and shoot. If you look at these night shots here, the Sony does a pretty respectable job. Now, it definitely can't hold a candle to the P30 Pro that I have comparing here, but it does hold its own fairly well. Now, Sony does include a night mode that you can see here as well, and it's pretty much useless in comparison to everybody else. I do this exact same shot on pretty much all of my phones to show how the night mode improves low light photography, but it just really did not do a good job here on the Sony. Alright, so I've gone over a lot of features here of the Sony Xperia 1, and I look to be doing a lot more in my full review, especially focusing on the camera and display elements of this phone. Now, everything is not perfect with this particular device. Some of the downsides, like I mentioned, the wireless charging is missing. You only get a 3,300 milliamp hour battery, which is significantly smaller than its competition, and they're not running 4K panels. You've also got the price to consider at nearly $1,000. You've also got to consider the fact that this is missing some features that other flagships do have. Now, one thing I forgot to mention were the specifications. You do have 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage, so it's really good to see them increasing that from the 464 that they had last year. But again, compared to some competitors, even OnePlus, but the Galaxy S10 comes to mind, the Huawei P30 Pro, you definitely are missing some things that those devices feature. And the camera, and based on my initial testing, while it is incredibly good, and they did a really good job so far with the camera, it's not necessarily as widely adaptable as some of those cameras are. You still got focus problems, as we saw with the bokeh modes, and you still got some other issues as far as the camera taking a long time to switch between wide angle and telephoto and standard, just some niceties that those other device manufacturers have perfected. And you've also got software and UI improvements. Well, Sony has added things like a game enhancer, a 21:9 multi-window mode, and their side sense software. Their software isn't really fully fleshed out like you might see on a Galaxy S10, and some of it is more of a nuisance than it is actually a benefit. So stay tuned for my full review for all of these things. I definitely love to go in-depth on Sony devices. I have a love-hate relationship with them. While I love them, I also love to critique them on the things that I think they need to improve on. So that has been our initial hands-on of the Sony Xperia 1. Stay tuned to XDA TV and XDAdevelopers.com for all of our continuing coverage of this particular device and all of the other videos and articles we have go up. If you're not yet subscribed, please go ahead and do so and leave this video a like, as it really does help us out. Until next time, I'm Daniel Marchena, and I'll see you in the next one.